So Jason Garner was the CEO of global music at Live Nation. At one point, he was one of the top paid executives in America, and his whole life had been a string of successes. He started off as a parking attendant at a flea market, and then through ingenuity, through connections, through making friends with people, he worked his way up. And he has met mentors, people who've guided him on the way. And then his mother died, and he realized that he'd actually been driven by fear his whole life, and this had been motivating him. Some people, when they are faced with fear day to day, they retreat, but for Jason, it was the motivating force that led him to success after success after success. But when you're driven by fear, happiness is a hard thing to come by. And even though he was having these successes one after another, he found he wasn't being made happy by them. And he sought therapy after his mother's death, and that's when the floodgates opened, and he understood the power of taking a breath. And from then onwards, it was a kind of a journey of inward reflection, and he suddenly gained a new perspective of life, and he realized that happiness is an inside job. You know, we don't wait for the world to do things or to deliver certain rewards in order to become happy. We have to seek happiness first, and then the world will reward us. So I was very lucky to have a Zoom call with Jason. It was really inspiring, and I hope you get a lot out of this. We talk a lot about finding peace, how we have to sit with ourselves and learn to recognize and become aware of what's going on inside us in order for us to find peace, both internally and externally. And we touched on many, many things, and we talked about how the state of the world and how, there needs to be more compassion, there needs to be more pause. One of the big things that we talked about was understanding what is it like to be this other person. You can look at someone who might be completely opposed to your views, completely the opposite of who you think you are, and you can ask, what is it like to be them? And it gives you an opportunity to really try to understand what they think, what they feel, and we see our lives in high definition. We see other people's lives in low definition. But at least asking ourselves that question, what must it be like to be that person? And then asking ourselves that question, what is it like to be us? And that gives us an opportunity for a new kind of compassion towards other people, and also a new kind of compassion towards us. What must it be like to be us? Anyway, it's a great conversation. I hope you enjoy it. And I'm really grateful that Jason was able to give up some time to talk to me about this. I feel like I could have taken up his whole day, but I'm sure he was glad that we stopped it after about an hour. Anyway, enjoy this conversation with me and Jason Garner, the author of the book And I Breathed. So, Jason Garner, thank you so much for being my guest on my podcast.
Hi, thank you. It's good to be here.
Well, I just feel very grateful that you've been able to spare the time, because you have quite a story behind you, and quite a few lessons that you've learned along the way, which you're kind of sharing now. Your life has it's been many adventures, one after another, and you started off as a kind of parking lot attendant at a flea market, and then ended up as the CEO of global music at Live Nation. Chris Martin got you to shave your moustache off, and
It's coming back. It's coming
is
back.
it? Oh, because the quarantine is doing that to all of us, isn't it? But yeah, no, quite a story. And then you reconnected, I suppose, with a kind of notion of what God is, I suppose. And that's not necessarily God as in the man with a big beard and white gowns sitting on a cloud that kind of is the traditional image, but something much more, I suppose, personal and well, we'll get into that in a little while, but maybe a little bit. So I've been reading your book, And I Breathed, which is your life story, and then talking about your kind of coming to terms with your place in the universe, I suppose. And it's a fascinating story, and there is a kind of underlying message I get about you from this story, which was from the very start, you've never really thought you could fail. And even when you did fail, you always sought a solution. And we can talk about your story if you like. You started off as a parking lot attendant at a flea market. You became friendly with a lot of the kind of Spanish-speaking people who worked at the flea market, and some of the people who came there to shop as well. Learned Spanish. Then you got into the kind of boxing scene, so, thanks to your Spanish. And long story short, you ended up becoming a kind of a concert promoter, touring with Enrique Iglesias and some of the big names. And yeah, I mean that is like a super condensed version of your story. But there was always this kind of this notion of kind of pushing harder and harder for success. And very early on in your book, you asked the question, what do I have to feel like? What do I have to do to feel successful?
Yeah.
And I mean, did you ever find that answer in your professional career?
I think it's probably what I've learned is that that's not something we can ask our job to do for us. You know, like that our job is there to fill the bank account
Yeah.
and not necessarily fill the heart. That's really an inside job. And I think some of us have jobs that we love and it can help. But I think what I've learned is that, you know, we spend a lot of time kind of out here looking out, and that happiness, that peace that we talk about seeking is actually, we find it by turning inward.
Yeah.
And we find it by growing closer to ourselves, closer to our fears, closer to our guilt, closer to our shame, closer to our hope and dreams and all of those things that reside inward, but they're hard to look at. And it's much easier to look out and to get kind of distracted by the shiny objects that are out in life, which is fine. That's part of being a human. But I think when we add awareness to that, then it starts to become kind of this inner outer partnership.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I started to become very comfortable with myself and love myself and become friends with myself and recognize, oh, I know that little neurotic voice, you know, and that's the little boy who thought that he wasn't good enough unless he became the CEO of global music. You know, oh, I know that guilt, that's the little boy, you know. And so as we start to watch our reactions, we start to ask the question, what's it like to be me in this world, this external world? And we look inward for those answers, there just becomes kind of this really kind of tender relationship with ourselves over time. And I think that's where kind of this feeling of success and happiness and peace comes from, by going, hey, it's just okay to be me, you know, and it's okay to be me when I'm on top of the world. And it's okay to be me when I'm shut down for coronavirus. And it's okay to be me when a business deal fails. And all of those things are actually opportunities for me to get to know myself and to gain a little bit of intimacy with my own experience.
That's really interesting, actually, because that's something you phrased in the book that I had never really thought about it that way before. You were having your kind of counseling sessions with Dr. Dunn,
Yeah.
and you were going back over your family tree, and she was saying, imagine what it was like to be your grandmother.
Yeah.
And then that's something I've never really, that's an angle of kind of empathy and compassion that I've never really thought about. You know, I've always thought, you know, this person, they're angry, and they might, you know, there might be someone who is diametrically opposed to me. You know, there might be someone who is, you're right wing. I'm very much a lefty liberal kind of easygoing kind of softy. And there are people on the other side of the spectrum who I don't necessarily agree with, and I wouldn't necessarily want to be in the same room as. But at the same time, I've always kind of thought, well, you know, they hurt just like we do.
Yeah.
But I've never kind of thought of it as like, imagine what it must be like to be them.
Yeah.
And
I
then,
think that's such a great question. I mean, for me, really, that question has become the definition of compassion.
yeah,
And it's just like, you know, you just see somebody and you imagine like, or another great question is like, what would have to happen in my life for me to behave that way?
yeah,
You know, there's a video going around today about a fight at the Red Lobster restaurant in Pennsylvania on Mother's Day. And, you know, these people are waiting outside and they want their food. And these poor workers, most of whom are people of color, who've been deemed essential because we want them to go to
yeah,
work and while we stay home. and a actual physical fight breaks out, and it's so easy to get drawn into like saying that someone is wrong, and of course there's a function of that, and that will happen. But I think all of us, I think one interesting task is to watch something like that and then imagine, well, what would have to happen in my life to
Yeah.
make me behave that way?
It's,
And it's then it's just a tiny step to compassion. I mean, it's like, because we all have an answer, you know, like you see someone on the street, a homeless person who's using drugs, and say, what would have to happen in my life for me to be that? And then all of a sudden you realize, oh wow, I'm that person, that person's me.
yeah.
And the coming together of causes and conditions in my life brought me great success, but a couple things go the other way, and there I am. And then all of a sudden, you know, they're not quite that big of a stranger, and they're definitely not evil and horrible and all the monsters, all these names that we want to put on other humans, when we just think, you know, that could be me, and what would happen in my life to make that be me. And I think for me, that's compassion. That really is the definition of compassion.
I mean, they say that we're never more than a couple of paychecks away from being
Yeah.
homeless and destitute.
Yeah.
But
Or
there
a
was some,
death, or an
yeah,
accident, or I mean, so many people that get injured and then they take a prescription medication, and before long they're addicted and they're taking heroin now. And it's like, it just, you know, we're all of this. We're all of these things that happen. And because some causes and conditions made me and others made you, there's still this kind of baseline humanity that we can get in touch with. And then I think it's important also to say, that doesn't mean that we don't watch a video like the Red Lobster video and be outraged by the racism in the video. And that doesn't mean that somebody ultimately, there isn't a punishment for somebody who physically assaults another human being. It's just, we don't have to do those things and at the same time forget about humanity.
yeah,
I can very much be aware of, hey, I'm angry with Chris right now, but he's still human. And I actually understand why he did what he did, that I felt harmed me. And then if you do the same, it's very easy for us to understand each other. And while maybe we never agree, let's
mhm,
say we're on opposite political spectrums, which we're not, but let's just say we may never agree, but I don't have to go that extra step of vilifying you, of taking away. I think it's there's this crime that we do to each other of taking away each other's humanity, and say, because you did something or because you believe a certain way, you're not human.
yeah,
And that's the part we have to be careful, because we actually punish ourselves, because we create a very kind of impersonal, very lonely world if we look out and we start taking away people's humanity. And in many times we commit the same the same crime that we're angry that others are committing, right? And so I just think we can see a human being, we can understand what the life of that human being must be like to make them behave that way, and still say, I disagree with that. I'm going to fight for justice. I'm opposed to your actions without being opposed to your humanity.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that is, I think there's a hunger for that at the moment. I think we need that. I think what we're seeing in the world, not necessarily with coronavirus, but certainly with the way politics have gone recently. And I had a very early on in my podcast, I interviewed a Buddhist monk from San Diego,
Oh, nice.
and it was a very interesting conversation. And it was purely, I managed to grab hold of him at a conference, so it wasn't planned or anything. But he basically said what we're seeing in the world now is a manifestation of hurt and anger, and it's becoming represented by the way people are voting and by the way people are um, becoming, expressing it. And that kind of comes to the surface in politics, in the kind of anger on the street and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And Chris Martin actually said what we're seeing here now is a swing from one way to another.
Yeah.
And when people get it out of their system, it will swing back. So
Yeah.
don't worry.
Yeah.
He was a huge optimist. You know him better than I do, but I found a lot of reassurance in that, this idea that it does swing the other way, and it will keep going backwards and forwards.
And I think that's why, like, that's another reason why it's important to not miss the inner aspect of everything that's going on. Because if my happiness, if my, well, even okayness, even just my ability just to kind of reside within this skin and bones in this world is dependent on the pendulum being on my side, then at best I have a 50-50 life, right? You know,
Yeah.
and I think that's why we have to look at all these without, that's not a, it's not a nihilistic position. It's not a, it doesn't matter what happens out there, because clearly it does. You know, clearly it matters when people are being hurt and people are being oppressed, but it also matters what's going on inside. And I think we have to have that marriage of inner and outer, or else we are just kind of riding that pendulum back and forth, and depending on, and in a world that's moving so fast, it literally is like,
Oh
you know,
yeah.
it's like this on a daily basis on what news you're going to see. And I think that's where that pausing and taking the time to become acquainted with what's going on inside is just as important, maybe more important, because I think it provides us the, that kind of peaceful um, baseline to then go out into the world. And I think you can see with clearer eyes. I think you can take action that is, it perhaps comes from a pure place, and still, as I said, be just as intense and just as engaged in the world,
Yeah.
but not be doing it from this very reactionary place of riding the pendulum back and forth.
Did you, before you took your breath, as you say in your book, and started on your journey of kind of, I don't, what would you call it? Journey of self-realization, or
Yeah, yeah, of getting to know myself, maybe,
yeah.
of, yeah, yeah.
Um, before you did this, I mean, it sounds like you had a pretty positive outlook on life anyway. You always kind of, a lot of your success seems to come from friendships that you made along the way, and conversations that you had, and um, you know, just by at least in the beginning, happening to be in the right place, and
Yeah.
you know, talking to the right person next to you, you know.
Yeah.
um, do you think that comes from, that is a manifestation of a positive outlook on life, and a fairly balanced outlook on life? Or do you think you
Yeah. I don't, I mean, one thing, I was really scared. And so
yeah,
there was this kind of, you know, my mom had taught me to be happy and positive, and she was also very scared on the inside. And so part of it was a mask. But I struggle with, like, the word, all these words are so charged nowadays. And I
yeah,
think I struggle with the word manifestation, because I would never want to give the impression to somebody whose life is not going well, who's struggling, that, hey, if you just think some happy thoughts, it'll all get
yeah,
better. And
yeah,
because things can get better, and sometimes that does work, but sometimes it just doesn't. And there's, we have, you know, whole systems in place that have kept people down for centuries. And so I struggle with that word. And I think, I feel like when I look back on my life, I was very much driven by fear.
hmm,
Um, and yes, I made lots of friends along the way, and that's just there's a great saying that a man in the entertainment business said. He said, "I have no problems, I have friends."
yeah,
And I really try to subscribe to that, and then I try to be that kind of friend back
yeah,
out to the world, where, like, I want to be that person that people can call when they're struggling, you know. And so I don't know. I think I subscribe much more to the Buddhist view of the world, which is our existence is just a coming together of causes and conditions. And I think we can impact those, but I don't know. I struggle with that concept, because I
yeah,
know so many people that have sat around and just done everything right, and I see them struggling in life. I see them down on their times. And right now, I mean, we have a whole global system. Everyone's struggling right now, and so
yeah,
I'd hate to ever make anyone think that, hey, if you go and say some Deepak Chopra mantras, the COVID virus will go away and it'll all be better. I don't believe that. I think actually these moments draw us inward.
mm,
And as we go inward and as we explore the question, what it's like, what is it like to be me? I think we feel less alone, and suddenly we get to know ourselves. And when we get to know ourselves, as I get to know Jason, I get to know Chris.
yeah,
And it makes it easier for me then to connect. It makes it easier for you to send me that unsolicited email and me to say, yes, it would be wonderful. Let's talk. I see we have some things in common. How great, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think more that kind of, yeah.
Yeah. So it kind of, I suppose it comes a little bit to the idea that there are things we can control and there are things we can't control. But we tend to focus a lot on the things we can't control, like you said before, the things outside of us.
Yeah.
In order to, I'll be happy when I get the big house or the new
Yeah,
wardrobe or whatever it is. And actually, we have very little control over this.
yeah.
Like you say, it could be that success relies from a conversation you had at the age of 20 with the person stood next to you.
Yeah.
And if you didn't have that conversation, then, that will never happen, or at least it won't happen then. But there are things you can control when you look inwards. So your kind of perspective on life, your decisions to go and take action and to take risks and to tackle your fear one way or another. I mean, were you aware that you were afraid when you were going through your professional career and achieving all of these heights?
I was aware that nothing kind of brought me that happiness I thought that was supposed to be there. I think, like when you say control, I think it's an interesting concept. Like I kind of can control that I go out and take a risk, but I could break my leg too. And so
Yeah.
even there, we don't have that control, but we very much believe in kind of this, if I do this, then this will definitely be the outcome thing. And so like, I think most of us in capitalist societies have been raised to believe, if I make a lot of money, I'll be happy.
Yeah.
And I learned that's just not true. Like I just kept making money and now it does. If I make money, I'll be able to buy the groceries. Yes. If I make money, I'll be able to pay the rent. Yes. So not to compare levels of suffering, because obviously money makes life easier, no doubt. But one of the questions I kept exploring is, okay, like how much money and stuff do you have to have before you're going to be happy? And what I realized is that those two things actually aren't connected. The happiness is that part of just getting comfortable with myself, and so not even looking inside, trying to control the outlook, just looking inside and observing what the weather's like today.
Yeah.
And I think when we do that, kind of like look inside, like impartially would be kind of a word, like we just observe, and the way we would, like if a friend called us and was just in a horrible problem and you just realize all I can do is sit with my friend, I can't fix their problem. An example, my stepsister's husband died of the coronavirus this week.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
And so she called me, and it's very easy to fall into the trap of saying, well, let me give her some spiritual solution, I'm going to make her feel better. But you realize, no, when you lose your husband, there's no feeling better on day one and day two, And so then I have to kind of check myself and go, my job is just to show up and be here with her. I'll just sit here on the phone with her and say, I love you. And I can't take away the pain, but by doing that, we can take away the loneliness of having to deal with it all by ourselves. And I think if we turn that inward, it's the same thing. And then meditation, instead of having this mission and meditation of like, I'm going to feel peace today, or, the world's going to be better when I get done with this meditation. It's just a matter of accompanying ourselves on the journey of life. And what we take away is the loneliness by being there for ourselves. But whatever's there is okay. And the more that we watch and are okay with what's there, then peace is kind of this byproduct of being okay with my life.
Yeah.
And again, it doesn't mean I choose it to be this way. It doesn't mean I want it to be this way. It doesn't mean I'm not going to work to make change tomorrow. But it means as I sit here today, I choose to not argue with reality, and I choose to be a friend to my own life and to my own self. And I'm just going to be here with myself. And whatever's there is there, Yeah.
Byron Katie, she says something very similar. She says something along the lines of the hardest times of my life have been when I've argued with reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
And society works on this kind of this dissatisfaction. We're always wanting more, and society feeds. I say society. I mean this kind of capitalist machine that.
Yeah. Yeah.
We need to buy more stuff. We need to aspire for more income so we can get more stuff, and that will validate us as human beings. But I mean, what do you think would happen if we all stopped wanting more stuff? Would
Yeah.
society break down and fall apart? Or
Kind of seeing it right now. I mean,
yeah, I mean,
it's very
there's lots of
interesting.
shows.
Like I used to say, my greatest wish for my friends was that they'd have a month to just stop and be with themselves.
Yeah,
And here we are, and it's hard, right? That's what we're seeing. And I don't know, like I still want stuff. I
mhm,
think the difference is like the amount, it's like the volume on the radio. I was
yeah,
I was with my daughter the other day who loves the singer Billie Eilish,
hmm,
and um we were debating over the level at which Billie would be played in the car. And I think that's kind of, it's kind of like, can we find this? And I think it's really that, it's like how much, the Tibetan Buddhists who I've studied quite a bit with, um, kind of will take their finger and hold it like this. And it's like, the challenge with Western society, they would say, is that you're just squeezing. So you're hanging on so tightly. And then, it's like peace just is kind of this subtle release. You can't see it in the
yeah,
video, but like, it's not I have to this, it's just don't, okay, just there. It's this little
yeah,
move towards letting go a tiny bit. And we don't do it because we're afraid everything's going to fall apart. Like, we believe that we're carrying the world on our shoulders, and as much as that might feel like it's true, it's not. And so I think every tiny step towards letting go gives us the confidence, oh, I can let go a little more, I can let go a little more. And then, yeah, maybe you want a new car, and if you have the money for the car, cool. But that, it's not, the only way I'll
yeah.
be happy is if I have the car, that
And
kind
it's
of thing.
not part of your identity and who you are to
Yeah.
crave this stuff.
Yeah. And then the challenge with that is not that it's bad to have a car. It's that the moment you buy the car, I went to the finale one year of The Voice, the TV show The Voice,
Yeah,
and it was this like amazing surreal scene. Like, the winner wins, and like confetti comes down, and the music plays, and everyone's hugging and crying. And then 5 minutes later, the TV show's over, and then literally like everyone gets up and leaves, and there's like guys sweeping the confetti.
yeah,
That's it, right? The challenge with searching for peace out here is that they keep sweeping up the confetti.
yeah. It's like
We're like on the ground going, I want the confetti. It's Monday. I still want the confetti. And it's like, no, we're sweeping up. And then you go, I got to create some new confetti moment, and some new confetti moment, some new confetti moment. And I think in my case, that exhausted me. And I just said,
yeah,
I have to look somewhere else. And that's kind of this continuing looking that I'm doing now. And it doesn't go away. I think that's another thing, is like, I have a trouble with teachers who kind of say, like, if you do my meditation, you're going to feel. It's not
yeah,
true. That's more capitalistic selling of something. The truth is that it's a lifetime journey of getting to know ourselves. And I think we could equate it to, if you're in a romantic relationship, when do you stop being kind to your spouse?
yeah, yeah,
Like, why don't you try staying, hey sweetie, I'm done. I've been kind to you for the last 10 years, and now we should just be, it doesn't work, right? And so, when do I have to stop looking inside with tender eyes? The answer is never. The answer is we just keep doing this and doing this and doing this. And as we do that, we develop a more intimate relationship with our own experience. And life gets to be a little easier. Not perfect. It doesn't make coronavirus go away. It doesn't make death not hurt. It doesn't make all fears go away. It's just more like, when I'm scared, it's okay.
yeah.
And I have somebody there with me who is me, and I'm going to hold my own hand on this journey through these scary times. Yeah.
Do you think we need to? I mean, you when in your book you talk about a series of kind of tragic events. There was one where you were in New York and you thought your son had been shot dead,
Yeah.
but sadly it was your father-in-law who died, and then your mother passed away, and you sought therapy, and that's where you took your first kind of deep breath, and the
Yeah.
floodgates opened. Do you think we have to kind of have this sort of awakening to ourselves, or at least start on this journey? Do you think there needs to be some sort of some sort of crisis or tragedy or something that knocks us down in order for us to start looking inwards?
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, it's helpful,
Yeah,
and it's that thing that people glibly sometimes tell you is, yeah, on the other side of this tragedy is something
yeah,
beautiful, and it's like that kind of talk doesn't usually help us, feel better. Actually, it usually makes us feel worse because then I feel like I'm supposed to be feeling
yeah,
some other thing. I mean, the kind of like the Zen texts are full of these stories of spontaneous awakening, and I suppose they're true, but I think what I've observed in life is that it usually takes life knocking us down, and usually a few times.
yeah,
Like I kind of have this philosophy that life is always talking to us, and it starts as a whisper, and most of us are so busy we can't hear the whisper. And then it gets louder and gets louder
yeah,
until finally it comes along and like smacks us in the head like a Laurel and Hardy movie or something, and then
yeah.
we
So
go
for God's
falling
sake,
all over and spill the coffee and fall
yeah,
on top of the dog, and then we go, oh wow,
yeah,
and so I don't know, in my life certainly it's been those moments. And then after those moments, as I did start to look in, I become more sensitive to kind of like the conversation of life. And I think we we can kind of have this interactive relationship with ourselves and with life, with each other. And maybe it doesn't require so much violence for us to listen.
yeah.
But in the beginning, at least in my experience, and in God, almost everybody I know, yes, the awakening comes from some tragic event that kind of shakes us, and then we say, oh, I'm going to pause and look in a different direction, and then we see something else.
And possibly on a wider scale, this is what we're experiencing right now with this global pandemic. Possibly
Yeah,
a
I kind of
chance.
sometimes I think about it like the app Google Earth.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah, and so do you know how like you can like zoom in and out, and I think what happens really is like we often are so zoomed in, and like if you pick a property and you zoom all the way into it, you can start to see like the cracks on the
yeah,
paint, and
yeah,
like the car that's broken down in the driveway, and the dent that your daughter put in it when she was learning to drive, and then it's easy to say like, oh wow, this is a really like horrible place, and it's
mm,
not attractive and I don't like it. And then as you zoom out, suddenly you start to see the trees, and then you see a city, and then a forest, and then kind of a whole planet. And I kind of think like this spiritual journey is learning to use that zoom in and zoom out.
okay,
And
that's
we
interesting.
need to see the big picture. It's important, but if you only see the big picture, you can end up being quite nihilistic.
Yeah,
And you also need to see the zoom, but if you only see the zoom, we become very materialistic and very like obsessed about this, and I think just
mm,
having kind of that flexibility to learn that you can move in and out, and that's actually a tool to be able to do that with our own mind. When I notice I'm too obsessed about something material in the moment, I can zoom out 3 notches and get
yeah.
a wider view. And when I notice that I'm kind of aloof and not caring about the world, I can kind of zoom in and get more in touch with what's going on. And that's something we can all do proactively as we're walking through life.
I mean, that sounds like a meditation in itself. Just
Yeah.
bring yourself back to awareness of where you are right now, and if you need to adjust that,
Yeah.
then adjust it.
And that's really the core definition of meditation, is awareness, right? And I think it's something I've been really focused on in the last few months. Because I've been home and like watching all these Netflix series, and it's like all the fallen gurus of, the 60s
Yeah,
and 70s, it's like the same story over and over and over again. It's like you really start thinking about it and you say, all that a teacher actually has to offer us is different paths towards awareness.
yeah,
And then that's it. And then really like the teacher get out of the way, and then let the student have their own awareness. And so everything can be a meditation. Like I sometimes will practice, like I'll be on my iPhone and I'll be, holding it, and then I'll realize, oh wow, I've been lost for some period of time in whatever's in the content. And then it's just, here is my hand holding my phone.
yeah,
And then that immediately is awareness. And we discount that as like, what we tend to do is go, I've been lost, I'm horrible. I'm not a good meditator, like I should be, but actually that's it. That moment of awareness, that's it. And then the more you practice that, you just keep having, these tiny moments many times of awareness. These are my feet touching the ground. This is the tea going in. This is my lips feeling the tea.
Yeah.
And all of those start to add up, and they're quite valuable and they're quite profound, and we don't give them the credit that we should, but that's really all meditation is. And then you string a few of those together, and before long you meditated for 15 minutes or 30 minutes, or go on retreat and meditate for a month, whatever. But that's it. And I think we can take our meditation out into the world if we're gentle with ourselves and go, it's just enough to notice the blossom on the tree,
Well, exactly. I mean, talking about sort of awareness and being able to focus your awareness, and practicing focusing your awareness, and you start to realize there are multiple worlds all in the same plane of existence.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, I've got politics and everyone's screaming at each other on Twitter and everything's horrible. On the other hand, my car is broken down and I'm sort of focused in on these things. And then a bird has made a nest in the tree outside my window and it's a beautiful blue sky, and I can choose what to kind of accommodate within me. It's like, okay, am I going to be a broken down car, horrible Twitter day, or is it going to be a blue sky, birds singing outside my window kind of day? And by I don't know who it was who said it, but by changing ourselves, we change the world. And if we encourage, the next person that you meet to say, "Isn't it a beautiful blue sky day today?"
Yeah.
You raise everyone's vibration a little bit, and people become much more attuned to. Actually, I'm not gonna be angry today. I'm not gonna hate the person with the politics opposite me. I'm gonna recognize the humanity in them, just as I recognize it in myself.
Yeah,
And we
yeah.
start to change
And
the
if I
world.
do catch myself hating that person, the bird is still there, and that's still real too.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I think that's one of the things is like I think we don't allow ourselves to see the bird or to
Yeah,
hear the chirping of birds is something that's like I really appreciate that because it's almost everywhere.
yeah,
Like I've been in New York City, lost and then just had a moment of awareness, and there's birds and they're chirping or nesting on a windowsill, and it's like that's there. And then, so the pain and suffering is real,
yeah,
but the chirping bird is also real, and when we put them together, it does turn down the volume a little bit on just doom and gloom.
yeah,
And
completely.
I think it's important. I think most of us don't like the guy who in the midst of everything all he can talk about is the bird.
Yeah,
Like, no, like there's still wars going on, there's still this other stuff. So I just think our challenge is to expand our awareness and be able to hold it all
yeah,
and be okay. Hey, this is our world and it's got wars and birds in it, and that's the truth. And
yeah,
so hold it all and notice it. When I got the news that my brother-in-law had passed, I didn't immediately go and like look for a bird. I sat and cried.
yeah,
It was sad, and I was sad for my niece and sad for my stepsister, and like sad for myself and sad for the world. And then at some point I got up and I walked outside to the garden, and I have a particular Japanese maple that I love, and I just sat with the tree. And suddenly my pain and grief is there with the tree, and I'm just holding it all. And I think
mm,
we have to give ourselves permission to find the good, and not as an antidote to the bad, but just as the looking out honestly at the world. That's all there. It's
yeah,
all, it's the beautiful blossom and the dead deer are happening simultaneously in nature. And I think, again, as we start to kind of look with non-judging eyes, we could start to hold a bit more of our
yeah.
experience.
There's a Japanese haiku. I can't remember who it's by, but one of the classic haiku poets, and it's something along the lines of, and I don't know it off by heart, but it's something along the lines of, that my lover has left me and I'm filled with grief, but the weeds are still growing outside. And
Yeah,
it's like, life does go on. This is not
yeah,
the
yeah.
end.
Or Isa's great poem on the anniversary of his wife or his son's death. They both died very close to each other, and he said, this dewdrop world is but a dewdrop world, and yet,
Yeah,
you
and
know,
yeah, I
and
know
so
that
it's
one.
like that's it. And like I get the spiritual teaching, and then I'm human,
Yeah,
and we have to give ourselves, especially in these really difficult times, that permission for our humanity. And so when we talk about like let go, or we talk about kind of seeing the world non-judgingly, that includes ourselves, and perhaps most importantly ourselves, because then it carries over to others. And so as much as I want to be compassionate, sometimes I'm not.
yeah,
And now what am I going to do with myself? It's like I understand that was the dewdrop world. I understand that all of the world is existing in this drop of dew, and it'll be gone by morning. And yet when someone I love is gone,
mm,
I still give myself permission to grieve. And when I go out into the world and I don't behave compassionately, or I'm not proud of how I'm acting, can I also give myself that same
yeah,
permission that says, okay, cool, now let's start again. And that's another lesson of meditation, which is we're always starting again.
yeah,
You
absolutely.
get lost and you come back to whatever focus of attention that you had in your meditation. And we just do this like nonstop, sometimes thousands of times in the middle of a meditation, just lost and come back, lost and come back. And that's this massive lesson for our lives, because we're just so cruel to ourselves. We're just so like, we think we read a Eckhart Tolle book and suddenly we're supposed to like
Yeah,
walk around and reside in emptiness. And it's like, it just doesn't work that way. It really is this lifetime of beginning again and again and again, and being compassionate and kind to ourselves as we go through this process of humanity.
Carl Jung said that one of his quotes was um, beneath the something along the lines of beneath the surface of reality, everything is, or beneath the threshold of awareness, everything is seething with life. I think it was something
Yeah.
along those lines. And it's like up here in the conscious world, we're all angry all the time, and we're all hungry for more, and we're dissatisfied, and we're arguing because your politics are different to mine, or I don't like the color of your shirt, or whatever it is. But we're completely, like you say, forgetting about this inner world, and that also includes things like imagination and creativity. And
Mm.
I have this kind of idea of when we are able to focus our attention, we can make things that are unreal, so dreams and visions and ideas, you can make them as real as you can explore them, as much as you can explore the outer worlds.
Mm.
And that's where art comes from, that's where poetry comes
Yeah.
from. And if we just open ourselves up to that a little bit more, these kind of portals can be portals into other ways of living with ourselves and being comfortable in this world. And maybe scratching that itch a little bit, finding some sense of calm and peace and satisfaction, rather than this constant hunger for things to be different than the way they are right now.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I guess it all comes down to, are we at peace or are we not at peace?
Yeah.
And perhaps when you had your therapy sessions with Dr. Dunn, and you took that breath and the floodgates
Yeah.
opened, that was on your way to peace, to
Yeah.
tackle that fear and to say, maybe I am enough, I've got enough, and
Yeah.
to have to sit quietly with my pain and my hunger and my dissatisfaction.
Yeah. And can we do that? Right. And I think the answer for most of us is no.
Yeah,
And so we start, and I think that there's no other way to do it than to start. And I think we start very slowly. And, I have lots of people calling me right now, and I've been telling them that I don't believe now is a good time to start meditating.
no,
And I'm meditating that thing that I'm trying to be dramatic about with my hands right now.
yeah,
And I said to people, why don't you just set an alarm in your iPhone for 1 minute every hour, and then just stop and close your eyes and breathe and be aware of what it's like to be you. And that's it. Don't give it a name. Don't give it a purpose. Don't expect fairies and unicorns to be the result of that experience. Just do that. And I think that's the other thing, is that if we've spent a lifetime, as almost all of us have out here,
Yeah.
then the journey inward, it's called a journey. It's called a path. We have these names that we've given it, and it's because it's just like every other journey, every other path we've been on, and it requires many, 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 many steps. And we have to take the first one, but I think we often want to take the first one and want it to be this leap to the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was on retreat one time in the Colorado mountains with a Tibetan Buddhist teacher, and a student raised her hand and she described this like really moving, beautiful meditative experience amongst the trees and kind of oneness. And she said, "So that's it, right?" And the teacher said,
We're
"No,
here. Yeah.
no." And she says, "Well, what do I do with it then?" He said, "Take a hammer and smash it into pieces." And she got very sad, and she said it was like this very earnest moment, so sweet. And she said, "But then it won't be beautiful anymore." And he said, "You didn't ask me for beauty, you asked me for freedom." And it was like, this was this very moving moment for me, this moment of like, that's it. Like, if I go out questing to find beauty all the time, that's not it either. I become a slave to the beauty the way I had become a slave to my job and the seeking. And it's actually in the seeking that we find, like, can you relax the seeking and be okay with your life? Can you relax the seeking and be okay with what shows up for you in meditation? Because then you're free.
Yeah.
We can put ourselves in a jail of I need a brand new Porsche, as easy as we can put ourselves in a jail of I need the world to be beautiful right now. And one of the things that like I talk a lot about is like it's not realistic sometimes, these things that we're asking for. And so when you're in the midst of a really turbulent time, it's not realistic to ask your meditation to be as if you were floating on a lake. Instead, we're kind of, this might be my meditation that day. And then can that be okay? Can I sit with myself while I'm gargling water in the lake? How about that?
Yeah.
Can I sit with myself while I'm in the lake and someone's throwing rocks at me? And I think oftentimes the answer is no, but if we just practice that, if we practice being with those moments, we start to feel this peace that we're talking about today, which is I can reside in this world and be okay with what's going on. It might be painful. It might be horrible. I might wish it would go away. I might try my best to make it go away. But here I am, as you said, the Byron Katie quote, like, here I am, and I choose to not make it worse by arguing with reality, And I think that really is the essence of meditation, a moment of awareness that I just choose without adding or subtracting to make it, to allow it to be okay,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It reminds me of what you were saying about the Tibetan Buddhist, holding onto the finger. I have this, I've written about this kind of metaphor that I use where you're holding onto a dove, and I call it the black dove metaphor, and it's pecking at you and it's scratching, and you're there saying, why is this dove being so horrible to me? Why can't I have the things I want? Why can't I, why can't life be perfect? Instead, it's this horrible kind of, painful thing. And all you have to do is let go. All you have to do is release your grip a little bit and suddenly understand that, I'm fighting with reality.
That's it.
How do we balance then that kind of letting go and being at peace with striving for more and striving for better? I mean, I would love a Ferrari. I would love a massive house. But how do I not let that kind of hunger and that desire for material things kind of poison my sense of peace, if you like?
Yeah. I think the first step is just to begin, and one thing is I have a lot of friends who are like strivers, and I'm a striver, and they always tell me like, well, I don't want to lose my killer edge. And I tell them like, you are so far from losing your killer edge. Like, don't worry about it. Like on day one, if you've never meditated, you're years and years and years away from not striving, like just, it's okay. Like you can meditate for 15 minutes every day for the next 40 years and your killer instinct is not going to go away like that. That's one. And then I think the other thing is also just to watch it, like that's an interesting thing to explore. Like, why do I want a Ferrari?
Yeah.
Who is it that wants a Ferrari?
Hmm.
What is a Ferrari? And they're like kind of big spiritual questions, but I think they're fun. And if we can bring some like a sense of humor to it too, I mean, I think you were talking about haiku, and I think one of the things that I like about Zen and haiku and some of these um, these traditions that were polished by the Japanese was they have a sense of humor to them.
Yeah.
Like a lot of haiku are quite funny, and
Yeah, I mean, this is it. I started reading, I thought they were these deep, meaningful things.
yeah,
And a lot of them about sort of sex and body
yeah,
parts, sort of metaphors for, when flowers blossom and
yeah.
all these kind of things first thing in the morning. And when I found out that, I was actually quite shocked and disappointed that all these kind of wise poets that I thought were these kind of really deep, mystical people are actually
Yeah,
just talking about kind of morning glory and that kind of
yeah.
thing.
And that was, I think, one of the essences of haiku is that everything's found in the mundane,
Yeah,
and the mundane then therefore must include, it's not just the beautiful flower.
yeah,
It's also, everything. And so I think we can bring that same sense of humor, but what we do is we go, I am now a meditator. I don't want a Ferrari.
yeah,
Okay, they're both lies. You're just a guy who's sitting down to meditate, and the essence of meditation is to be with what is there, to be aware of what is there. And maybe that's interesting. So what? Meditate on, I want a Ferrari,
yeah,
and play with that a bit in your brain. And like, why is the Ferrari important? Oh, because when I was a little boy, I saw this on, I saw Magnum PI, and he had,
yeah.
whatever, maybe that was not a Ferrari, but
Yeah, no, it
he
was,
had
it
the
was.
nice
Yeah,
car. And then I noticed that he had the woman that I dreamed of. And then, and we start to see these stories that we've told, and then without judging it, you could just watch it, and then it becomes kind of fun. And actually the desire for the Ferrari is quite silly, because
yeah,
that guy was a character on a TV show. And I don't have any idea how his life turned out in real life, but like,
yeah,
and so I think it doesn't have to be so serious, it doesn't have to be so solemn, and we don't have to push away thoughts. If what's there is a Ferrari, then it's cool, be with the Ferrari.
yeah.
Because one thing that we know is for real is that thoughts come and go. And so if you watch the Ferrari, you'll watch in a minute, the Ferrari will be gone. And then
Yeah,
some haiku about sex will be there. And then some tragic memory will be there. And then maybe a moment of not a lot of thought, and it's kind of peaceful. And then the pain in your knee, then the desire to go to your iPhone, and then another moment that's maybe quite peaceful. And we just watch this, like the classic metaphor is that you're sitting on the bank of a river,
yeah,
and you're just watching the river go by, and the river is your thoughts. And when we're lost in thought, it's that we've fallen in the river. And I really like that metaphor. And the only thing I like to add is that realization of I've fallen in the river
hmm,
is quite profound, and often more profound than just sitting and watching the thoughts is I am lost in thought.
yeah,
And because the contrast in that moment, the moment you say I'm lost in thought, you're aware. And the contrast to where you were just a nanosecond earlier is so profound that often you can kind of have a, whoa, that was kind of deep. And so we're watching the thoughts, we get lost in them. We have moments where we realize we've been lost, and then that's meditation. So who cares? Want a Ferrari, don't worry about it. And even I notice my whole identity is tied up in a Ferrari. That's beautiful. Like you just got to know something about yourself that you didn't know 10 seconds before. And then we can just explore that without wanting it to go away. Just hang out with that thought a little bit. That's cool. That's fine. You and everyone else. So that's great. We're all human now. We all want Ferraris, and we could just be with it a little bit. And I think that for me is the secret of meditation, is just being with these things without, we just
yeah,
beat the crap out of ourselves, and we're so hard on ourselves. And then we look out in the world and we see this world that's so hard on us. And it's impossible. So we have to bring some inner kindness and some playfulness to our own exploration, I think.
yeah. I think so. And I think we have a problem as human beings. We attach too much meaning, personal meaning, to situations. We make too many things about us and too many um, we infer meaning that isn't necessarily there. So,
Yeah.
Am I a bad person because I want a Ferrari? It doesn't have to be that way. Or my wife is home late, she must have got into an accident. Or,
Yeah.
there are so many times when, if you can just be with what's actually happening. My
Yeah.
wife is late. That's all I know.
Yeah.
I want a Ferrari. Fine.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to mean something.
Yeah.
I
I
didn't, I
have it.
didn't get, I didn't get an invitation to someone's party. Well, it's
Yeah.
fine. I might not be their favorite person. That's fine.
Yeah.
It is what it is, and it's not. I'm not defined by that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a teacher who teaches dream yoga,
Oh yeah.
and he has this great saying, because everyone always says that they always want to tell him their dream and think that their dream has some great meaning. And so you'll be sitting in a class with him, and everyone will raise their hand, they'll tell him some dream, and he'll be like, "Thank you."
Yeah.
Like the most unfulfilling thing, because you
That's
want to
so
hear
frustrating.
that
Yeah.
dream means that. And then one time I was with him, and someone raised their hand and said, "Is there meaning in dreams?" And he said, "Yes, but you have to remember there's also dreaming and meaning." And it's like that, right? It's like
Yeah.
we're always making up all of this meaning. And I think one of the things to watch with our thoughts is that you don't own them.
Yeah.
And if you watch your thoughts long enough, you notice that a whole bunch of stuff that you don't own comes into your head. Now, because you can identify with the Ferrari thought, you go, that one's me. But
Yeah.
if you're going to do that, you better take the next one, which could be like you smashing someone's head in, or, all the crazy things that come and go through our head, and we don't do that. We just grab the 5 or 6 that are me. And then we go, because that ones I think are me, and we go, that's mine. But if you actually watch your thoughts, it's this horrible mishmash of stuff. And it's like a radio station that you love that plays 5 songs you love and 5 songs you don't quite like that much. And that's what this is all going through. And so as I watch my thoughts, I can then get comfortable with, oh, wow, I don't have to believe them. I don't have to own them.
Yeah.
And that's very freeing as well. Right. And then because if you try to find meaning in them all, good luck. Like there's a lot of crazy stuff in your head.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, you're a parent. I remember holding my very vulnerable young baby when she was first born, and I just thought, I have so much power right now. This baby is dependent on me, and suddenly all these kind of beautiful thoughts were popping in there, horrible thoughts were popping in there. It's like, it would take nothing at all to do something really awful, but at the same time, and that was quite frightening to me. I was like,
Yeah.
why am I having these terrible thoughts? And it's because we have this responsibility in front of us, and suddenly our brains are firing off, and you have to become a little bit aware of what's going on in your head. It doesn't necessarily make you a bad person or anything. You're just, these things are
Just a
just
bunch of
going.
thoughts. It's a
Yeah,
river.
it's just a bunch of thoughts.
Rivers
Yeah.
going by, and you watch them. And I think as you do that, and how beautiful, right? Like, and if we would do more of that kind of talking, honest talking about, hey, I noticed in my head was this thought, I think it makes it easier. The problem, one of the things is that I believe my thoughts are very unique to me.
Yeah.
Because we don't talk about these things, right? And so like we all get together and we talk about, the football game, instead of talking about like, well, hey, what do you think about today? And if we did that, we'd start to see like, oh wow, all these nutty things that I think are unique to me, they're not. Everyone's got these thoughts going on. Everyone is living in this mishmash, and everyone has these hurts. And I often say, like, I think instead of name tags with our names on them, we should put like our traumas.
Yeah.
So then like I walk up to you and it's like, yours says like, I'm afraid, and mine says I feel shameful. And then I'll be like, wow, okay, well, let's talk about this a little bit, like,
Absolutely.
and that's it, right? It's like we're back to that core theme of we're just humans going through this world, and it's not easy. And none of these things that we talk about in spirituality are an antidote to that humanity. Instead, they're actually just ways to draw a little closer to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I realize I've kept you talking for nearly an hour now, so I'll wrap it up pretty quickly. There's so many things I've highlighted from your book, but there was one thing. you talked about Guru Singh. So your life, you've had many gurus. One of them was your boss at Global Music,
Yeah.
and lots of kind of mentors along the way that you've learned from, business partners, people you've met. But then you went to actual Guru Singh,
Yeah.
and you were doing one of his yoga classes. He got you into yoga reluctantly,
Yeah.
and I can't remember exactly what you said, but you said something along the lines of, he taught us all that we are teachers.
Hmm.
And I mean, are we all teachers? Do we have that responsibility that we have to kind of shine the light for other people? Do you think? Is that
Well, I like how you phrased it. Do we have the responsibility? I don't know. I don't know about the responsibility, because again, I just feel like that's adding on to my life.
yeah,
I think more the point is that we're all whole and complete and enough.
yeah,
And while we want to learn more, and while we want to achieve things, it doesn't take away the okayness of this moment. And I think that's more what he was trying to say in that moment. And then definitely what I would say now is, I think we have to be careful about taking people, especially in the spiritual space, emotional space, and putting them up on these altars and saying like, that guy's not human, and I think really one of the things that I've learned is that spiritual teachers have excelled at a skill set, but many of them, I have one teacher who tells me like he talks about like how much easier the inner experience is with students in the East,
yeah,
that like they just really like this horrible like self-doubt and loathing is much more prevalent in the West. But then he'll tell me, but I'm not saying the West is bad, because if you've ever driven on a road in the East, like you guys actually, you have these things and they actually function and work. And like,
yeah,
like students show up on time to my classes when I come to California. And when I'm in Kathmandu, it's like 2 hours later they showed up. And so we have this tendency to go like, that guy has it all figured out, or that woman has it all figured out, when in reality they figured out a piece.
yeah,
And I think what many of us in the Western world are trying, or coming to a realization and trying to do, is to figure out, how can I bolt on that piece? I know how to achieve. I know how to make things function in my life. I know how to get to work. I know how to, I know how to do complex tasks often, but then I don't feel happy. And so that doesn't mean your life is bad. That doesn't mean what you've done is a waste. It just means I never practiced that skill of being happy within my life. And now who has that skill set? The same way, if I wanted to learn to shoot a basketball, I would go look for a
yeah,
basketball coach. I probably wouldn't assume that the basketball coach knows everything about life. I might not ask him for marriage advice, for instance,
yeah, yeah,
but we do that with our spiritual teachers. And so I think the point, maybe better stated than we're all teachers, is that I guess we're all teachers of something, but we don't have to place so much on these people who have figured out something in the spiritual space, just a skill. They practice it. I want to learn that
yeah,
skill. And if I don't put them here, somehow I don't push them away. And then somehow I'm much more of that than I ever believed that I was. And there's something beautiful in that understanding, I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, brilliant. And so I guess I'll wrap it up. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate your time. If people want to find out more about you, because you do write and you blog,
Yeah.
where can they go? Where's the best place to go and get the whole Jason Garner experience?
I post every day on social media.
Yeah.
So my Twitter is at the Jason Garner. That's also my Instagram. And then I have a website, which is jasongarner.com.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so there I
Fantastic.
am.
Great stuff. Well, thank you ever so much. I really enjoyed that. I felt like we could have probably gone on for another 6 or 7 hours.
Yeah, the hour went by very quickly.
It really did. And yeah, I sometimes I find myself getting carried away and need to kind of draw it to a close. But I really appreciate your time. It's still
Thank
the
you.
morning where you are, isn't it? It's
It's probably it's noon right now, so
noon
it's
right now. Okay.
lunchtime.
Well, I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, and you
And
too. Have a good evening.
yeah, thanks ever so much. I really appreciate it.
All right, big hugs.
Thank
Bye.
you. Cheers. There we go. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with me and Jason Garner. I got a lot out of it myself, particularly that question, what must it be like to be this person, to live their life? And then when we turn that question on ourselves, what must it be like to be us? And give ourselves an opportunity to see ourselves objectively. And also to learn to be aware of how we feel and be aware of what we're thinking. And just kind of remove ourselves, that one step removed, so that we can see our emotions and learn to either use them or let them guide us, or just sit quietly with them, allow ourselves to be unhappy, allow ourselves to be sad or in discomfort. Because, the more we fight with reality, the harder life becomes, So there we are. That was a really interesting conversation. If you'd like to hear more of this kind of stuff, let me know. You can find me. I'm on all the social medias. It's Chris Brock or Chris Brock Photo. Also, check out my website. It's www.chrisbrock.uk. There are multiple ways to get in touch with me. Just let me know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, review. And until the next time, hope you enjoy that. And bye for now.